High above the landscape of southern India stands something that seems almost impossible. A colossal human figure carved from solid granite, nearly 60 feet tall, weighing an estimated 1,000 tons. And somehow, after more than 1,000 years, it is still standing. But the size of this ancient monument isn't the only mystery. Look closely at the statue's face, the symmetry, the smooth curves, the enormous ears, the perfectly carved lips, the fingernails, and then there are the strange, precise lines around the neck. For centuries, the official explanation has been relatively straightforward. Skilled artisans carved this entire monument using iron tools, sometime around the 10th century. But when you stand in front of it and see the sheer scale of what they accomplished, a question becomes difficult to ignore. How? How did ancient craftsmen transform an enormous mass of extremely hard granite into something this precise? And did they really do it using nothing more than hammers and chisels? This is the mystery of India's incredible Bahubali statue. And the deeper you look, the stranger the story becomes. The statue is known as the Gamuteyash Vuru Bahubali statue. It stands on Vinhyagiri Hill in the Indian state of Karnataka. The monument represents Bahubali, an important figure in the Jain tradition. According to the story, Bahubali gave up his kingdom and stood completely motionless in deep meditation for an entire year. He became so still that vines began growing around his legs, and that's exactly what we see on the statue. Massive vines climb up around his body, but above them stands an enormous serene figure, completely motionless, his expression calm, his face almost perfectly balanced, and towering over the people standing at his feet. The scale is difficult to understand from photographs. A person standing beside the statue looks almost microscopic. One of the statue's toes is several feet long. Its ears are larger than many human beings, and yet, despite its enormous size, the details are astonishingly refined. This isn't simply a rough figure carved into a mountainside. It is a carefully designed work of art, and according to traditional accounts, it was completed around 981 AD. That alone would be extraordinary, but the material makes the mystery even more interesting, because this statue is carved from granite. Granite is one of the hardest stones commonly used in ancient construction. It is extremely durable, extremely dense, and extremely difficult to shape. Even today, cutting and polishing granite usually involves powerful machinery and specialized tools. Yet more than 1,000 years ago, someone created a nearly 60-foot tall figure from this material. The traditional explanation is that skilled craftsmen used iron tools and abrasives over many years. And it's important to remember that ancient Indian civilizations possessed sophisticated knowledge of metallurgy, engineering, architecture, and stoneworking. They were capable of extraordinary things, but even acknowledging that, this statue still raises fascinating questions. Just think about the process. First, the builders needed an enormous mass of suitable stone. Then they needed a plan, a full-scale design. They needed to maintain proportion across a structure nearly 6 stories tall. One mistake could potentially ruin years of work. Carve too deeply into one section, and there's no way to simply replace the granite. Yet somehow, the proportions remain remarkably consistent. The face, the shoulders, the arms, the hands, the legs, everything had to work together. And this is where the mystery becomes even more interesting, because many people who see the statue notice something unusual. In certain areas, especially around the neck and other surfaces, there appear to be remarkably regular lines and patterns. To some observers, they almost look like machining marks. Could they simply be the result of ancient carving techniques? Possibly. But when combined with the statue's extraordinary precision, they leave room for speculation. Could ancient craftsmen have used techniques that were far more sophisticated than we imagine? Or are we simply underestimating what skill humans can accomplish with simple tools? Another mystery involves how the statue was created in the first place. Was this enormous piece of granite transported to the top of the hill? Or was it carved directly from the natural rock? Moving a 1,000-ton object today will require serious engineering. But moving something of that size more than 1,000 years ago up a hill would be an extraordinary achievement. That's why many researchers believe the most likely explanation is that the statue was carved directly from the granite formation already present on the hill. In other words, the builders didn't bring the statue to the mountain provided the stone, and everything surrounding Bahubali was gradually removed. Imagine that. Instead of assembling a monument piece by piece, workers may have started with an enormous natural mass of granite and spent years removing hundreds of tons of unwanted rock, slowly revealing the figure hidden inside. But that explanation creates another question. How did they remove that much granite with enough precision to create a statue of this quality? This wasn't simply destruction, it was controlled removal. Every strike had to serve a purpose. Every surface had to follow the original design. And somehow, the final result still stands more than a millennium later. At the base of the monument are inscriptions associated with its history and dedication. These inscriptions are one reason the statue is traditionally dated to around 981 AD. But some alternative history researchers have pointed to the apparent contrast between the monument itself and the inscriptions. The statue is enormous, sophisticated, carefully proportioned, while the writing at its base can appear much rougher and more irregular. To some, the difference raises an intriguing possibility. Could the inscriptions have been added later to an already existing monument? Could a ruler or religious community have claimed an ancient structure and incorporated it into their own traditions? It's an interesting theory, but at the moment, there's no solid evidence proving that the statue existed long before its accepted date. This is where the story enters one of the most controversial areas of ancient history. Across the world, there are ancient monuments that appear to challenge our assumptions about what earlier civilizations were capable of. Massive granite blocks in Egypt, precision-cut stone structures in Peru, enormous temples in Cambodia. And here in India, a gigantic granite statue standing silently on top of a hill. Some people believe these structures may point toward forgotten technologies, methods of cutting, shaping, and moving stone that have disappeared from history. Others argue that there is a simpler explanation: human skill, generations of specialized knowledge, enormous workforces, ingenious engineering, and patience on a scale that is difficult for modern people to imagine. Maybe ancient builders didn't need machines resembling the ones we use today. Maybe their methods were simply different. Techniques passed from master craftsmen to apprentices, knowledge that took centuries to develop, and in some cases, knowledge that was eventually lost. Because that's perhaps the most fascinating possibility of all. Not that ancient civilizations possessed futuristic machines, but that they may have mastered forms of craftsmanship that no longer exist. Imagine an entire profession devoted to one thing: cutting stone, polishing stone, moving stone, generation after generation, perfecting techniques over hundreds of years. Could such knowledge produce something that looks impossible to us today? Maybe, but when you stand in front of Bahubali, it's easy to understand why the questions remain. More than 1,000 years after it was supposedly completed, Bahubali still stands above the landscape, silent, serene, and almost impossibly large. Whether it was created entirely with iron tools, abrasives, incredible human skill, or techniques we have yet to fully understand, the achievement is undeniable. Someone stood on this mountain over 1,000 years ago and looked at an enormous mass of granite, and somehow envisioned this: a perfectly proportioned giant, nearly 60 feet tall, weighing around 1,000 tons, carved with astonishing detail, and still standing today. Maybe the greatest mystery isn't whether ancient people had machines. Maybe the real mystery is whether we've forgotten just how advanced human craftsmanship could become. Was the Bahubali statue simply the result of extraordinary ancient craftsmanship? Or are there still unanswered questions about how something this massive and precise was created? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoy exploring the ancient mysteries that continue to challenge what we think we know about the past, subscribe to Ancient Destinations, because some of history's greatest mysteries may still be hiding in plain sight.